Okay, will we call the roll?
Mr. Boykin. Oops, thank you, Brian. Mr. Boykin? Here. Mr. Keeley? Here. Ms. Dillon? Here. Mr. Rosensteel?
No, he's not here.
Right. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
So you have to. Thank you.
Okay.
I need you.
You okay if there was a software?
Sure, yeah, I'm good at it.
Okay. You tell me if you need Mary.
Okay, no, I'm good.
Okay.
Item 2, approval of minutes from of the April 11th and May 4th, 2012 committee meeting. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank you. I know. Okay, item 3, the state and federal legislative adoptive committee position. Marianne Ashley.
Hi, good morning. Originally, we had 3 bills to be presented today for the board to take a position on. However, as Ed noted earlier in the week, recent legislation on 2 of those measures has made it unnecessary for the board to adopt a position on 2 bills. That would be AB 2260, which failed passage out of the Senate Policy Committee, and AB 178, dealing with post-retirement employment. That actually has made it to the governor and is pending his signature or veto. So unless the committee had any questions on those 2 bills, I will move on to SB 114. Any questions?
I had one question. Just so it's at the governor's office, and is it just what's the time frame, or do we know anything, or are we just waiting to hear?
12 days to either sign or veto or take no action. If he takes no action, it just becomes law. So
No action, it becomes law. Okay, great. Thanks.
So with Senate Bill 114 by Senator Yee, that bill requires that the collective bargaining and employment agreements for community college adjunct and adult education instructors be submitted to CalSTRS. That information would be cross-referenced with the information that CalSTRS receives in the monthly employer reports, and it would provide additional information to ensure that the community colleges are reporting accurate service credit for part-time and adult education instructors. Additionally, CalSTRS is working on an agreement with the Chancellor's Office to utilize information that they receive from community college employers to help verify the FTEs that are reported to CalSTRS. There are no program costs associated with the measure and no direct costs for receiving the contracts. And staff is recommending now a support position as the amendments that we had suggested were incorporated in the bill with the amendments made on June 20th. So.
Great. Any questions from members?
We need to take a position.
Yes.
So,
Move
and
support- move
We're
support
recommending a
amendment?
support.
Oh, I guess I should do this officially.
sorry, what do I? Okay.
Move support if amended.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, actually it would be support because the bill has been amended as, yes.
Okay. So can we just amend that, or do we have to go back through it?
I think we're okay.
Okay, great. All right. Item 4, Deputy Chief Executive Officer report.
Yeah, there's, you know, the legislature's in recess now, and they'll be back August 6th. Obviously, the most significant issue addressing pensions is the pension reform discussion that's going on. And as many of you are aware, there has been work on the conference committee. They've sort of had a proposal sort of crafted. They've been working with the administration on, you know, trying to see if there can be an agreement on that. At this point, the governor had asked the legislature to hold off on releasing any sort of proposal so they could have some more internal discussions with the legislature. So we anticipate those discussions will be going on during the recess, and we would expect to see something early in August or as soon as they come back. It's not really clear exactly what the issues are, other than what we've seen in the paper, where it sounds like it has something to do with around the structure of a hybrid plan, and what the retirement age is that would be required to receive the benefits. But at this point, there hasn't been any public discussion about, that I've seen at least, in terms of what the specific issues are. So there's really not much to report at this point. But as soon as we hear something, for sure we'll let the board know what the specific proposal is, and if there's an agreement, what the nature of that agreement is.
That also means, Dana, for the board meeting later today, Ed and I had placed an item there for pension reform, and we were going to do a full-blown presentation for you, so we're not going to do that.
Ed, from my understanding, one of the issues with the governor was around the stacked hybrid, and was that, when you talk about that, that's kind of the issue, whether it'd be a stacked hybrid or more of a...
Well, that's one. Yeah, I mean, I can anticipate there perhaps being two issues. One was the legislature seemed to be very interested in the cash balances being the other piece of the hybrid, whereas what the governor's proposed was a more traditional defined contribution. That was one part. The other part is, as you said, is whether it's a stacked hybrid, meaning that compensation above a certain dollar amount goes into the other part of the hybrid. The compensation below it goes to the defined benefit program. What the governor proposed is that all compensation that is creditable would go to both the defined benefit and in his case, a defined contribution plan. So I think there's sort of, I suspect, without having talked to the staff, because we're sort of leaving them alone this week, that both of those may be the issue that is being discussed.
Okay.
I also think it might be good for us, if you recall last meeting, I did a briefing for you on San Jose and San Diego before the votes. We were meeting just at the time of the votes, but now again, since that meeting, we've got Stockton and now San Bernardino, this week, getting ready to seek Chapter 9 bankruptcy. So I think it might be good that we can do some dialogue with you around those bankruptcies so you can see how the pension obligations are being handled. Obviously, they have a totally different legal environment that guides those decisions, but it informs the political debate, I would argue. And so I think it's important that we all stay educated around those local government issues if they're going to be so high profile.
Right, any questions from?
Jack,
Oh, sorry, did I not?
No, that's me.
Okay. Sorry. No, you gotta go.
Do you want to use your helpline?
Can I call a friend?
How many do we get? So I would agree, Jack, that we should be monitoring those local issues, Stockton, San Bernardino, and potentially others down the road. How do you foresee that conversation? Where do you see that, happening at this level, and the impact that it has, and why it's so important that we monitor those?
Well, I think clearly we saw what happens when these issues get put on ballots. We haven't seen and the type of pension reform that's done with a hatchet, I guess I'd argue. If in this case, this will be the axe will come through the work of lawyers and judges, a different body of decision makers, but because they're not necessarily done with the best intent, you're not going to end up with the best solutions that are balanced. I think that'd be pretty obvious from that kind of process to me. And that changes sometimes the bar that is set for reform as the public views reform, to the extent that people view it's, we hope they don't, that it's acceptable to replace these pension plans with 401ks, or it's acceptable to do something else. That changes public opinion and puts pressure on policymakers in Sacramento too. So I do think this isn't a very interconnected political world, that these things matter, even if it is in a localized courtroom in San Bernardino or Stockton. So we want to see the issues that are put on the table to modify those pensions if that gets to be the topic. Vallejo didn't turn out to be the test we all thought it would be. If we remember, we were all focused on Vallejo and wondering what did that mean for collective bargaining rights and what that meant for pensions and health care. Now we need to see, I think, if San Bernardino or Stockton deal with those issues in a way that informs the debate. I guess I'll defer to Dana just to whether or not we're the best place to to do some of that information is I think we are expecting that Ed and I would be doing presentations in the board meeting. Clearly after the August recess and as our funding strategy starts to get traction in the next 6 months, we would be doing educational pieces for you and discussions in the board meeting. So maybe it's placed there. I'll let you decide where you want us to talk about that. But Mary Ann's staff is monitoring the local government situation. I did want you to know that staff is watching those. We're trying to watch every move there so that we are not surprised by any kind of decision making in those environments.
But in a more global nature as well, you're looking at the investments, because we do have some investments with those folks. I think Mr. Rose was here and we talked about what we're doing. Chris, refresh my memory. Mr. Rose of your staff spoke about some of the municipal investments we have. And to me, from our fiduciary role, that is as critical, if not more critical, than the other stuff that happens, because it is money that we have invested that we have potential of losing or getting cents on the dollar. And I imagine you guys are tracking it from that angle as well, Chris?
For the record, Chris Elman, good morning. Sorry, I have a head cold, so kind of losing my voice. You're talking about for the audience's sake, the credit enhancement program where we lend CalSTRS credit worthiness to help municipal bond issues. We're very focused on our city exposure. We actually have a list. We don't have any exposure, thankfully, to Mammoth or Vallejo or San Bernardino or Stockton. Thank you. With very limited exposure direct to cities. Right now our credit quality is still very, very strong. But that's an area that we pay close attention to because particularly in Stockton, they're trying to take something out of the bondholders as well as everybody else. And if one of our cities or one of our credits was exposed, then we get into that. Our underwriting standards in that program have been really strict. And so we think we've got a lot of protection before we would get to that. But we'll keep the investment committee informed if we get close to any cities that we're worried about in that portfolio.
Thank you.
But I think we should be ready for some wild predictions. Remember a couple of years ago when a very well-known person was predicting a string of municipal bankruptcies. I mean, clearly now having 3 discussions in a row is going to create a lot of talk time chatter. There's no doubt about that.
Sorry to take a little bit of time. There's an article actually out on Bloomberg already about how the fact that now you've taken the sting out of declaring bankruptcy. The politicians are, instead of seeing it as a career killer, they're seeing it as another option, and that maybe they won't lose their jobs immediately. So that may open the door to more cities considering it as a viable option rather than the enormous negative it normally would be.
Thank you.
I just had a comment too about, did you want to comment about the field poll? Because I found that interesting just recently looking at some of the data. That was interesting to me to find that there was, in terms of, in general in California, perceptions that maybe, people don't.
There was a field poll that just came out in the last couple of days talking about the voter attitudes towards pensions, and it indicated that while there was as much feeling that the pension benefits, generally speaking, were the right level as there were people who thought they were too generous, and there was, I think, 17% thought they weren't high enough, which is interesting. And there were some specific issues around, some aspects when they were asked about specific changes, there was more support about some parts of proposed changes than there were others, like having a cap on how much compensation counts towards classic retirement benefits seem to have a lot more support than other things. So, and that might help, or that might affect the discussion as well, because it doesn't seem that what people perceive, particularly after San Jose and San Diego, was this very clear desire to do something about pensions doesn't seem to be as widespread, perhaps, as people might have thought. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects the discussion that goes on.
Great, thanks, Ed. Moving on to item 5, review of information requests.
See if there are any additions or, okay. Let's go ahead and move approval. You go ahead and move it. If someone can move approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And then, tonight is opportunity of first hearing.
Are there any people in the public that want to speak? Great. All right, legislative committee is adjourned.